Okay, so hi everyone. Today we're going to be continuing our discussion on neuromuscular junction disorders, and today's class is going to be on an important presynaptic neuromuscular junction disorder, that is botulism. So I've uploaded notes for this topic on Neuraxis Pro, and I've also uploaded my class on Lambert-Eaton syndrome in Neuraxis Pro. So I put the link in the description. You can access them over there. So let's go into the class. So botulism is caused by a toxin that is produced by Clostridium botulinum. So Clostridium botulinum is a gram-positive anaerobic bacillus. So it's a gram-positive anaerobic bacillus, and there are 8 types of toxins. This is a very, very important MCQ. There are 8 types of toxins: type A, B, C alpha, C beta, D, E, F, and G. So in this, A and B are going to be the most common causes of botulism. That's a very, very important MCQ. And type E is responsible for botulism due to seafood poisoning. Botulism due to seafood poisoning. So what is the mechanism of action? So what happens in the neuromuscular junction in botulism? So let's have a simple diagram of the neuromuscular junction. So this is the presynaptic terminal. This is the presynaptic terminal, and here we have the postsynaptic muscle membrane. Postsynaptic muscle membrane. And this is the voltage gated calcium channel. And presynaptically we have the acetylcholine filled vesicles. So we get the action potential that is coming down here. It stimulates the voltage gated calcium channel, causing calcium influx and eventual exocytosis of acetylcholine into the synaptic cleft. So what happens in botulism? So there is a protein called SNARE protein. Okay, so there is a protein called SNARE protein, which is an important presynaptic protein that is responsible for exocytosis of acetylcholine from the acetylcholine vesicles. So in botulism, the toxins are going to predominantly act on the SNARE protein, preventing its action, hence preventing the release of acetylcholine from the presynaptic terminals. So this is the mechanism of action. So what are the modes of acquiring botulism? The most important and the most common cause is going to be ingestion of preformed toxin from inadequately sterilized and contaminated food. So the symptoms are going to begin 12 to 36 hours after ingestion of the contaminated food article. Now coming to infant botulism. So this is a very important question. So infant botulism is not because of a preformed toxin, rather it is because of the organism itself. Okay, so these Clostridium botulinum spores are going to go ahead and germinate in the immature gastrointestinal tract of the infant, and from there they are going to slowly release the toxin in small quantities over a prolonged period of time. And the most common the most common food vehicle in infant botulism is going to be honey. So this is an important question, and the presentation is going to be constipation, lethargy, poor suck, weak cry, limb and oropharyngeal weakness with hypotonia, poor reactive pupils, poor and dilated unreactive pupils, and decreased deep tendon reflexes. Okay, so it's an areflexic paralysis. So this is a presentation of infant botulism. Next, wound botulism. This is a very, very important cause in IV drug abusers, especially those who are going to use heroin. So the presentation either could be a local weakness or a patchy systemic weakness. So these are the 3 important modes of acquiring botulism. Now let's go into the clinical features. So there are 2 important clinical features. One is because of neuromuscular weakness, and the other is because of autonomic dysfunction. Because there's going to be involvement of your cholinergic nerve fibers in the autonomic ganglia. Now coming to the neuromuscular weakness symptoms. So the presentation is going to be a descending areflexic flaccid paralysis. Very, very important MCQ. So the presentation is a descending areflexic flaccid paralysis. So initially you're going to have cranial nerve or bulbar weakness in the form of blurred vision, diplopia, dysphagia, and dysarthria. And the patient is going to develop areflexia, that is reduced or absent deep tendon reflexes. And then the weakness is going to descend down to involve the limbs. And the most dreaded complication is going to be respiratory paralysis. Okay, now let's go into the autonomic dysfunction features. So the patient is going to have blurring of vision with very, very important dilated and unreactive pupils. Okay, so this is the pupils in botulism, and other autonomic features like dry mouth, postural hypertension, and urinary retention. Okay, so how are you going to diagnose botulism? So first, with electrophysiological means, you're going to see a reduced amplitude of your CMAPs. That is, the amplitude of compound muscle action potential is going to be reduced in at least 2 muscles. And in contrast to myasthenia gravis, In contrast to myasthenia gravis, you're going to get a incremental response. You're going to get an incremental response. Okay, so you're going to get a 20%, okay, at least 20% facilitation or incremental response of the amplitude of your CMAPs during tetanic stimulation. So tetanic stimulation is nothing but high frequency repetitive nerve stimulation, usually at a frequency of 20 to 50 Hertz. Okay, so always remember, myasthenia gravis, you're going to get a decremental response of at least 10% in repetitive nerve stimulation, whereas in Lambert-Eaton syndrome and in botulism, you're going to get a incremental response with high frequency repetitive nerve stimulation. High frequency is 20 to 50 Hertz. And this incremental response of facilitation is going to persist for at least 2 minutes after activation. And you're going to have short duration motor unit potentials that resemble myopathic motor units in the affected muscles. And just like in myasthenia gravis, if you do a single fiber EMG, you're going to get jitter and blocking. Again, this is an important MCQ question. And the definitive diagnosis is going to be by bioassay of the toxin in the serum. And you can also go for a polymerase chain reaction assay to detect the organism, that is Clostridium botulinum. So how are you going to treat botulism? So remember, antitoxin, very, very important. There are two types of antitoxin. Remember it for the exam. So bivalent antitoxin is going to have your most common toxins, that is type A and B, and trivalent antitoxin is going to have additionally type E. Okay, so remember, type A and B are the most common causes of botulism, whereas type E is responsible for seafood related botulism. Seafood related botulism. And remember, there is no major role of antibiotic therapy because the most common mode of acquiring botulism is by ingestion of the preformed toxin. So mainly you're going to give antitoxin. But in case of wound botulism and infant botulism, where there is going to be slow release of toxin by the organism in the tissues, in that scenario, antibiotic therapy might be useful. Okay. And the drug of choice for infant botulism is going to be your IV human botulism immune globulin. Okay, important MCQ. So other drugs may not have a major role in botulism. So we can try 3,4 diamidopyridine. So it is a potassium channel blocker. Okay, so it's a potassium channel blocker. It may improve the strength, but it will not help with your respiratory function. That is, it's not going to prevent respiratory paralysis from happening. And in case the patient is going to go for respiratory paralysis, you'll have to mechanically ventilate the patient. Okay, so this is about botulism. I think I've covered most of the important points. Thank you.